People keep telling me, no World War III, it's not going to happen. Russia is not going to nuke anybody. The escalation, it's meaningless. And I just don't understand. Russia accuses U.S. of being behind drone attack on Kremlin. That's a headline. Here's the actual story. The Kremlin says that the U.S. made an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Is this so they can have a casus belli to declare war on the West? This idea that we keep hearing in U.S. and Western media that Russia is failing or that their army is collapsing, I don't believe it. It's propaganda. It's all propaganda. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's true. I think it's all propaganda, though. But with Russia blaming the U.S., where do you think that brings us? Do you think Russia's going to be like, well, the U.S. just tried to kill our president, but we're fine. No issues here. Or do you think they're going to say retaliation? Here's the story from The Guardian. Russia has accused the U.S. of being behind what it says was a drone attack on the Kremlin intended to kill Vladimir Putin. Speaking to journalists on Thursday, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Ukraine was merely implementing U.S. plans dictated by Washington, but did not provide any evidence to support the allegations. Peskov said, quote, "We are well aware that decisions on such actions, on such terror attacks, are not made in Kiev, but in Washington. And Kiev is doing what it is told to do. It is very important that in Washington they understand that we know this and understand how dangerous such direct participation in the conflict is." Volodymyr Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials have denied Russian allegations that Ukraine was involved in a drone attack on the Kremlin that was intended to kill Putin. Dramatic video footage on Wednesday showed two flying objects approaching the Kremlin and one hitting the rooftop of the Kremlin Senate, an 18th century mansion within the grounds of the president's official residence. Now, I'll bring up a few points here. I think if I was going to make a bet, Vladimir Putin, the Russians, staged this. These drones appear to be small and likely not capable of traveling the great distances required to make it to Moscow, to make it to the Kremlin. But then again, I honestly don't know. Insurgent attacks, these smaller drones, apparently they're coming from Iran. Entirely possible. Either way, I should say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was Ukraine or the U.S. or Russia. Russia said it was us. They said it happened, and they will take action accordingly. Perhaps they faked the whole thing to muster up public support or international support, or maybe Ukraine really did launch this crude attack. Either way, the escalation will be coming. They say Putin was not in the building at the time. The White House said it was aware of the reports concerning the drone strike on the Kremlin, but was unable to confirm the authenticity of them at this time. Quote, "I don't want to get into speculation from here about what happened, but we are indeed aware of the reports," the White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said at a news conference Wednesday. Jean-Pierre added, "The United States is certainly not encouraging or enabling Ukraine to strike beyond its borders. Throughout the 14-month conflict, the Kremlin has repeatedly asserted without providing evidence that the West started the war in Ukraine. Russian officials have also blamed Western nations for orchestrating attacks inside Russia." Oh, man, I just hate the propaganda. Okay, look, I get it. There's a lot of stupid people in this country that will believe whatever you tell them. But yes, the West started the war. Sure. And I can already hear all of the corporatists, all the journalists, all the deep staters being like, Tim Pool's pushing Kremlin talking points. Okay, Russia has always been in Sevastopol. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, they were there. Russia didn't invade. They simply walked out of their naval base into Crimea. Granted, they did bring in forces. My point is this. There's never an innocent party in conflict. NATO has been expanding into territory on the Russian border. Estonia, Latvia, now Ukraine. There's the Gazprom gas monopoly. It is not so much that the U.S. started this, but that the conflict has always been ongoing. And I think it's fair to say that the West could have slowed down and said, we will respect these borders. This will be the neutral zone. Instead, they said, we will expand NATO right up to your borders. And you know what I actually think? The funny thing about all this is that now Russia goes to war. Oh, please. Talk about stupid. Estonia, Latvia. Come on. NATO's been expanding onto your border and only now you do something about it after you've already lost. You know, it's about gas, natural gas, energy. It's about control of territory, mostly for natural resources and influence in a region. And Russia is acting desperately. But they already lost this one. This was a geopolitical conflict, decades in the making, and Russia's moves here show that they are losing. Now, hold on. I understand. Many people say they're not losing the war. No, I'm saying they're losing. The fact that they had to resort to physical conflict at all shows they are desperate and losing influence in this geopolitical conflict. But I think it's silly to make the argument that Russia started the war. It's like, okay, well, look, that is literally correct, right? In that Russian troops began the engagements. But it's kind of silly to argue that a fight was started by the person who threw the first punch, as opposed to, say, the actions of the other individual. That is to say, let's say someone is taking action against your property in a horrifying way. They're not necessarily breaking it or destroying it, but they're trying to steal your car. You then go up and you say, back off. They say no. So then you try to physically restrain them. And then they say he started the fight by taking physical action first. Well, dude, you're trying to steal his car, okay? Now, Ukraine doesn't belong to Russia, but Ukraine's on the border. So it's almost more like a criminal coming to your house and trying to go through your yard or trying to cut open your chain link fence and you try to stop them. It's complicated. War is no simple thing. The Russian ambassador to the UK previously claimed, without providing evidence, that British special forces were involved in the Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow's Black Sea fleet last October. Okay, well, we have leaks now showing that the West does have special forces on the ground. Several hawkish senior officials called on Putin to take retaliatory action shortly after Wednesday's strike. The former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, said the attack on the Kremlin left Moscow with no options but to eliminate Zelensky and his clique in Kiev. While Vyacheslav Volodin, the chair of the State Duma, said new weapons should be used to destroy the Kiev terror regime. However, there are early signs that the Kremlin is keen to project a sense of normality. Peskov said on Thursday that Putin would not give a special presidential address in connection with the attack and that the usual working situation was in place. Peskov added that Putin was planning to work from the Kremlin on Thursday. Peskov also said that any retaliatory steps would be carefully considered and balanced by the Russian leadership. Observers noticed that footage of the drone was not shown on state television on Wednesday evening, as news anchors instead read out the Kremlin's official statement of the attack. You know, the important thing to understand here, they're saying they want to take out Zelensky. This probably was a false flag attack. Some kind of justification on the international scale so that they can then justify a counterattack, as they would call it, but actually an act of aggression against Zelensky. I'm not a big fan of Zelensky. They say Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner private military company, cautioned against the use of nuclear weapons after the strike. In an audio message posted on his Telegram channel, Prigozhin said, "As someone who is a radical person, I can say that the use of nuclear weapons in response to a drone, of course, is out of the question." Margarita Simonyan, the influential head of RT, said the Kremlin's somewhat muted response indicated the drone attack was not a false flag by the Kremlin with the aim to justify further escalation. I mean, it's a fair point. It was a rather muted response, and the video came from somewhere else, but maybe they calculated that. Simonyan tweeted, "If the drone attack on the Kremlin was a cunning plan by Moscow to justify firing a kill shot at the Kiev regime, the situation would look very different by now. The air would be filled with statements promising tough responses. An emergency meeting would have been broadcast, followed by an emergency address to the nation." I actually kind of agree with that. They would come out and they would say very strongly, this, we can't allow. The fact that it's muted suggests to me they're kind of worried that it happened. Scared them a bit. They do not want people to think their defenses are weak, and it looks like their defenses are. In which case, maybe not a false flag. But I'm not entirely sure. And so I kind of believe that it sounds plausible. Or it's 4D chess. They say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a muted response. Then we're going to have our state propaganda come out and say, oh, but, muted response signals. So we don't know. We don't know for sure. I can tell you one thing. They're blaming us. Take it with a grain of salt. I don't know what you can expect. It's been 14 months. The U.S. is absolutely involved in this conflict, and Russia thinks they're at war with us in the first place. Maybe this will be the first step in them getting prepared to declare war on us directly or to bring China into the fray and expand the war. But With news of this coming out, World War III was in fact trending on Twitter. So good luck. Hopefully everything works out for the best. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes. Stick around and I'll see you all shortly.